Well, Gary Wertish, president of Farmers Union, thank you so much for joining us today on the DFL Daily. Obviously, a lot of folks have been talking about farm country and the concerns they have for what farmers are facing in the midst of the tariffs and now with the situation in Iran. Really appreciate your time. Can you explain why prices are increasing for farmers right now? Where and why are farmers paying more?
But it really goes back to the President Trump's use of tariffs. That's really driven, that's had an exponential effect on increasing the price of pretty much everything or most of the products that the farmer buys, whether it's fertilizer, seed, or machinery through parts and steel and that type of. So that's where the primary thing comes from. But it's obviously we're in such a concentrated industry in all the various, whether it's seed, fertilizer, and machinery too, as far as that goes. But so you got the concentration issue, but the president's use of tariffs has definitely had effect and is definitely increasing the prices.
Definitely. Obviously Minnesota is known as an agriculture state, both the product that we produce and also, the cost of inputs for farmers. When you talk to your fellow farmers across Minnesota right now, what are you hearing? What's the mood? How are they feeling about the situation currently?
Well, farmers, you have to be optimistic to be a farmer, and now we get the spring, so you got that, but there's a lot of concern, a lot of uncertainty there, and there's the number of foreclosed or farm bankruptcies are up dramatically, and there's still a little farmers out on their edge out there that with the low prices and high input costs. There's a lot of farmers that are kind of on the edge of will they make it this year or not. And you still have some that are still trying to get operating loans. There's a few of them out there yet too. But unfortunately, the uncertainty that's happening, and a lot of this is driven by the President Trump's policies. But the uncertainty, it's really going to hit the small younger farmer that just started that doesn't have the equity. If you're an established farmer and have some equity, you can survive these things. But if you don't have built up equity, it'll be tough to survive this. And unfortunately, that's where the young farmer comes in. They don't just started. They don't have equity built up unless they're with a family that has it. So
Absolutely.
we're going to lose some farmers out of this. That's the unfortunate thing, and we've been going on for decades. You keep losing farmers, and that we're going to lose some more.
Got it. Obviously, the impact of the tariffs and the war in Iran on farmers is very direct, but we also know that Minnesotans feel that in other ways. When a farmer is hit and has to pay more, it obviously impacts other things. When farmers pay more, what happens at the grocery store? What happens to folks who need to buy their own food?
Well, you're going to see it. Right now, the president's decision to go to war in Iran is a good example of what's going to happen. It's driven up the price of fertilizer, and it's driven up the price of fuel and diesel fuel. Diesel fuel provide that provides all the freight. Everything that's moved by freight is the vast majority of it. It's truck or rail or even by ships. That's run on diesel fuel, the vast majority of that. And you're already seeing it from the suppliers as to the customers. They're adding a surcharge on a fuel surcharge onto the goods. That's going to show up in the grocery store. It's going to show up eventually. You pass on to the consumer, whether it's a canned goods or whatever it is. That price, it's going to affect everybody in all types of, not only food but any product that we buy. It's going to be there. And unfortunately, the farmer can't do that. The farmer can't add a surcharge to his commodity. He's already dealing with low prices in a tough margin situation, and in most cases, it's hard to cash flow, and you're going to show a negative loss. You can't pass that on. So it's going to hit the farmer even harder again.
Got it. We've been talking this week about the increasing costs and the price pressures that families are facing every day in Minnesota. They're all because of choices made, choices around the tariffs, choices around the war in Iran are two great examples that we've talked about today. Families already have paid $1,700 extra because of the tariffs since last February, and farmers have had to absorb an extra $958 million in machinery and chemical costs. What's the hardest conversation you've had with a farmer this past year because of that?
Well, a lot of it's the uncertainty coming of what it is. It's causing it tough to cash flow, and farmers out there, we're proud people. We don't like to talk about our struggles, and that's tough. But you know, there- it's a very hard situation. And then you got on top of that, you talk about mental health, talk about hospitalizations, the big budget bill that they passed a year ago, the full effects of that are still coming. The cuts to the healthcare. That's going to hit farmers too, because especially in the rural Minnesota, rural America, as far as that goes, you're the tax base on the small cities or the counties, the tax base is farmland. That's not every there's a lot of if you're a regional center, you have more industry to have a tax base, but if you get out of that, the tax base is the agricultural land, and it's county commissioners. They try and balance their budgets. That's the only sort of revenue they have is increased property taxes. There again, the big budget bill that maybe did some improvements to agriculture, but did a lot of disservice to a lot of cuts that are really going to be forced on the farmer too, on various, whether it's through increased property taxes.
As food continues to get more expensive for families, we also seen Congress has come through and cut SNAP benefits, cut food support programs. That really is a devastating double-edged sword there, or double hit for families. Can you talk a little bit about the tie-in between the hunger programs and the food security programs like SNAP, and then also egg production?
Well, the cutting of SNAP is that's a huge problem. We've been trying to get a new farm bill done. So we're still working on the 2018 farm bill, and that big budget bill, when they cut SNAP, dramatically cut SNAP, that broke the coalition apart. So it's going to be very hard to put that back together, to get a farm bill that actually works for rural America, and it works for not only for farmers, but it's a big deal, a big help for rural communities. But you look at the cuts of SNAP in some of your small rural grocery stores. 30% of their customers are SNAP benefits, so are using SNAP benefits, and if they don't have the benefits, it's gonna be hard for them grocery stores to survive. So it's gonna have a snowball effect. You're gonna have some grocery store or smaller grocery stores that, by their customers not being able to use the SNAP benefits and won't be able to buy from that store, it's going to force some closure of the rural grocery stores, which, same thing. It's rural hospitals and clinics are going to be hit too because of this, because all those cuts that came out of their big budget. They call it a beautiful bill, but it's definitely not beautiful in rural America.
Absolutely. A year ago we were promised a golden age. What action do you want people on this call to take today to make things better for farmers and families? What can we as individuals do to support the farm country?
Well, I think a lot of it is you got to contact your elected officials and both sides of the aisle. The one side of the aisle doesn't seem to be listening and just going along with this. The golden age. If this is the golden age of agriculture, just around the corner, I think the cliff is right there. That we're ready to fall off the cliff. You got diesel fuel prices up close to $2 a gallon in some situations, and it's definitely not. It's not a golden age for farmers. It might be a golden age if you're a billionaire. Have investments. They might. It appears they're the ones going to have the golden age. It's definitely not going to be the farmers, and they keep saying we got to have short-term pain for long-term gain. Well, this short-term pain for long-term gain, there's going to be a lot of farmers there. It's going to dramatically reshape rural America again. And you see that as we lose farmers, you see what's happened to the small rural communities. You have once that one time were vibrant main streets, a lot of empty, boarded up business places. Now they can't survive, and that this will put more pressure on that again.
Well, Gary Wertish, you are a leader in our agriculture community. Thank you so much for all of your leadership. You were the 2025 Orville Freeman Award winner for the DFL. We were proud to give you that award. One last word from you. What gives you hope today?
Well, I guess the one thing that gives me hope is the people that are starting to speak out. We're starting to hear some, whether it's at the caucuses or the community, the No Kings protest. You're starting to see more and more people speak out. I know some people that have voted definitely on the other side of the aisle, and I have come up and have thanking me for speaking out on various things. So I think there's an awakening. You look back to the Vietnam War. I'm old enough. I had friends that went there and had lost some friends that died over there. The protests that the protests that went on really got that war had a lot to do with getting that war stopped. So I guess if there's so we're in some dark times right now. It's hard to be optimistic about anything, but getting the people, there's more and more people starting to get involved in it. That's important, and it doesn't matter, Republican or Democrat. People have to get engaged, and they are starting to do that. And policies, engagement matters, and hopefully we get come through this and get some policies that actually work.
Great. Well, thank you, Gary, for being with us on the DFL Daily. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Richard. Nice talking to you.